So we're going to talk about probably, in my opinion, the most important skill in street photography, improvisation. And honestly, I don't think it gets talked about enough. Now, there are countless videos on here discussing photography tips, and you can learn most of the skills including composition, lighting, settings, or even the locations themselves by watching these episodes or from following your favorite photographers. However, being able to improvise on the spot is a far harder skill to learn. So what do I mean by improvise? The dictionary definition is to create and perform spontaneously or without preparation, or to produce or make from whatever is available. Now this translates pretty well into street photography because in essence, street photography is improv. When you're out there shooting, you're making the best of what's in front of you. You have no control over your scene or the subjects walking into it. You're recording what's there, and the challenge is to capture those subjects and those scenes in interesting ways which create good photographs. So let's dig into this a little more. In street photography, your subject, the scene, pretty much all of what you capture is constantly in motion and is out of your control. And therefore, you have to be able to adapt and improvise on the spot to any changes in the scene or react to how your subject moves. There are so many micro adjustments that need to be made while you're taking a shot, and the adjustments you make at that moment and your ability to improvise is going to have a direct impact on the photos you capture. There's literally milliseconds and millimeters between taking an average to good photo or a good to great photo. Often it's about waiting for the perfect timing, otherwise referred to as the decisive moment, or it's about changing your angle, moving the camera a couple millimeters and making some micro adjustments. Improvising often comes down to being able to adapt and react to your surroundings. So you're adapting to, say, your subject and how it moves in your scene, or you're reacting to your environment. You're seeing a puddle, you're seeing a reflection, and you're capturing your subject through those elements rather than just capturing a boring shot of your subject in the scene. And in my experience, the better you get at improvising, the more fun street photography becomes, because suddenly you're using your environment in different ways, you're spotting subjects come into frame, you're anticipating things, and it makes the whole process of photography more enjoyable. So here's an example from my own street photography. Shot this one in central London. Now initially I was taking a shot of the lady in a red dress against the blue door. I thought it was an interesting composition, the colors worked, and it would have been a decent shot. But while I was taking this shot, in the corner of my eye I see the second subject, the man with the umbrella, walking into frame. So I take a couple steps back, I readjust my focus and wait for the second subject to walk in. Now the second shot is far more interesting because firstly, there's more layers to the image, and secondly, the second subject looking at the lady in the dress conveys an emotion and it tells a story. And it's a simple example where I've been taking a photo, I've seen something coming into frame, improvised, reworked the scene and captured a more interesting shot. Another example is this shot here taken in Istanbul. Now, these characters sitting on a bench, it would have been an interesting photo. They were good looking subjects, the colors were nice, and just those subjects alone on a bench, as I said, would have been a decent shot. So this time around, I've improvised by using my location. I've seen the puddle on the floor, I've readjusted, reframed my shot, and captured my subjects in the reflection of the puddle. It's a simple change, but it takes a basic looking photo and turns it into a more interesting one. So how do you actually learn to get better at improvising? Firstly, it's repetition. There really is no shortcut to this, but the more you go out, the more you put yourself in the situations where you're making those decisions on the spot, the more comfortable you are going to get at taking them. Without putting the time in, without going out there, shooting constantly on the streets and really getting used to people walking into frame, the changes in the scene, and being able to anticipate things that are going to happen, you can't really learn it. So first thing first, you gotta get out there and shoot. There is no shortcut to it. Secondly, you have to be technically sound. Most of what's happening in street photography is happening in milliseconds. At the most, you have a couple seconds. So if you readjust yourself, you have to quickly change the settings, readjust your focus, and take the shot. And in order to do that quickly, you need to be very comfortable with the camera you're using. So much like the first point, which is repetition, you have to be very comfortable with shooting with your camera. That means you need to be able to operate this thing without really having to look at it. And that only happens, again, if you shoot often and you're very comfortable with the camera you're using. Finally, it's about being fully focused on what you're doing. When you're out doing street photography, you got to be in the zone, because the more focused you are on what you're doing, the more you're going to see. So if you go out and you're not really focused on shooting, you're probably going to miss the subject, or you're going to miss ways you can capture that subject in more interesting ways. You can't really take a lazy approach to street photography. You got to be fully focused. You got to go out there with the intention of taking photos. You don't always have to come away with a great photo. No photographer ever does that. 9 times out of 10, you go out, you get a couple average shots, you come home. But when you're out there, you got to be fully focused, because at some point you're going to come across a really interesting scene. And if you are really focused that day, you're going to capture that scene or that subject in a really interesting way, which is going to result in a great photo. Otherwise, you may just be out there, again, come across a great subject, take a few shots, they're average shots, they're fine, and then you move on, and it's all a bit forgettable. So being able to improvise on the spot is probably one of the most important skills in street photography, and it's one of these subjects which rarely gets mentioned in most of these tip videos I've seen. This is an episode I've been meaning to make for a long time. I think it's an aspect of street photography that doesn't get talked about enough, and the reason is you can't really package it up and teach somebody the skill very easily. So it's not like teaching somebody a compositional technique or something to do with settings where the viewer can take what they've seen and easily translate it into a photo they take in the future. When it comes to improvising, it really is about being aware in the moment while you're taking the shot, more than being able to learn something tangible like a setting or a lighting technique. So improvising, very important in my opinion. It really is going to be the difference between taking an average to good photo or a good to a great photo. So yeah, that's my views on improvising. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below, or if you have any questions about this, again, drop them in the comments and I will get back to you. A huge thanks for watching this episode. I hope this inspires you to go out there and shoot, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I feel so damn lucky. It's all because